this is James. Today I'm going to show you exactly how to cut half-blind dovetails and how to make half-blind dovetail drawers. Most of this is footage from my extreme miter station build. But I've had dozens and dozens of requests from people who just want to see how to do the half-blind dovetails and nothing else. So instead of having to find your way through those really long videos, I've used this footage and created a video specifically on how to cut half-blind dovetails. I use the Porter Cable 12-inch dovetail jig, and I have mounted a board permanently to it. This way I can just simply clamp this to my table each time I'm ready to use it. This is the 12-inch jig, and it happens to come with templates for both through dovetails and half blinds. Since my drawers are half blinds, I'll need to swap out the templates. Yeah, it's pretty easy to make this switch. Just loosen these two big screws here, and the template pulls out, and you just put the next one in its place. I've also written in Sharpie on each template which one is which, so that I don't have to figure that out again in the future. We got to make sure the screw clamps are loose enough to raise the template up to slide our board underneath. We can press the template down in place and just temporarily snug the screw clamps back up. The wheels in the back here are attached to this cam clamp, which will secure the piece before we start routering. Next, we'll slide the front one in behind the cam clamp there. We can spin these screw wheels down just a little bit tighter so that when we engage the cam clamp, it holds it snugly. Each time you switch board thicknesses, you'll have a little bit of adjustment to get it dialed in for what you're currently working on. Okay, we're getting closer. Now we want to make sure the board in front comes up flush to the bottom of the template. Then we'll slide the top board forward until it's flush with the other one. Just fidget with them for a little bit, and you'll get them both lined up flush to each other and flush to the bottom of that template. We're not really concerned with where they are as far as to the left or the right of the jig just yet. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of my drawers here, the two sides and the front and the back, and I'm going to label it. This is drawer 7, so I've got 7 side, and then I've got 7 front and 7 back. Okay, so I've got my 4 pieces together here. I want to make sure the wording is going to be on the outside of the drawer. So I'm going to kind of put the boards in their orientation as if they were a drawer. I'll put the back to the back, the front to the front, and the 2 sides on the sides, and I'll make sure the wording is on the outside of the drawer body all the way around. Next, I'm going to lay the pieces down, maybe sort of in an exploded view here, making sure that all of the insides face up. And now I'm going to mark that which corners belong together. This is A, and that one is A. Up in this corner we've got B, and that's B. And the next corner I've got C, and that will meet with C. And in the last corner I've got D, which of course meets with D. Okay, so we're going to grab 2 of these and we're going to head over to the jig. I'm going to grab the 2 A's. Each time you do a cut, you're going to make sure that you have the 2 letters that match. Okay, I'm a big fan of notes. I put them right here on my jig. The sides are the tails, and the sides go to the front of the jig. So you can see this board is a side, which means of course it's a tail, and the tail board goes to the front of the jig. Okay, we know that board goes to the front, but which side faces the jig? We have notes right on the jig itself. It tells us that the outside surfaces of the board face the jig. Now we know what the outside was. When we laid it out, we said where our words are the outside. Therefore our words have to face the jig. Look, there's another note. Lets me know the half-blind tail goes there. Now to get started, we're going to put this board in place, slide it all the way to the left, and clamp it down. Now this is critical, so we need to look carefully. If it doesn't slide all the way to the left, our stop is probably been locked down. We've got to make sure we loosen our stop, push it all the way to the left, then put our board back in place, slide our board all the way to the left, and then we can clamp it down. Okay, now we want to do some spacing so that it looks nice. We can see that this board is really more to the left than to the right. We'd like the two ends of the boards to meet somewhere in the middle of two of those open slots. I'm going to take measurements on both sides and try to get them equal. I can see that it's a little bit bigger on the right, so I'm going to have to slide the board to the right. Unclamp it, slide it to the right just a little bit. Alright, now we'll take one more measurement. This one's coming out to be about 0.450, if you can read that upside down. And I'll check the other one here. It looks like that is also 0.450. Pretty good. Now that we've got them the same, we're going to go ahead and slide this stop back over. This is the stop that's going to be used for every drawer that's this height. Then, of course, we want to clamp it down good and tight. Okay, time for the top board now. Remember, A has to match with A, and having the words means it's the outside. The outside has to face the jig. So it slides in just like that, and you can see the A is right adjacent to the A, just like every cut you make should be. You might notice how it's offset to the left. That little black stop block that we put in keeps those pieces offset by exactly that much. That's how the dovetails work. You should be able to see the offset there on both sides. Okay, the top of this piece of plastic here is preset at the factory, and this tells us how deep we want our bit. It is the depth stop, and it is on the end of every template. I start just a little high, and I dial it down until it just barely touches the surface. Okay, one last check and we're going to be ready to cut. If we take a look, there is a groove here along the top of our template. Now this groove has to be perfectly aligned with the seam between these two pieces of wood. That's going to tell us how far in our dovetail will cut. So we might need to loosen the brass screws in back so that we can slide our template forward or backward. And then of course the front screw will clamp it down to the brass screw. Just dial that back and forth a little bit while paying attention, and you'll get it just right. This jig cuts so accurately that I usually don't even make test boards to cut with. I usually just dial it in like it says and cut my first drawer, and I'm usually just right on. Okay, we're getting ready to cut here. If you bought this Porter Cable dovetail jig, it comes with that silver collet that you see surrounding the bit. That's what's going to guide us through these cuts. I like to make a light scoring cut first. This sort of minimizes the tear out, especially on plywood. Then we can go ahead and plunge into full depth and cut all the dovetails. Now I did have some tear out there. There's two reasons why that happens. I moved a little bit too quickly, and I was trying to angle myself out of the way for the camera. But in reality, that really isn't going to show once the drawers are assembled, and I'll show you. And now I'm going to take a minute to put these two together and see what they look like. And while I'm doing that, I just want to let you know that if you are looking for any of these tools, then I will have links in the description to everything I used in this video. You might notice once again here that A goes with A, and those are both on the inside, just like we drew in our exploded view. For some reason, plywood dovetails always take more persuasion than solid wood dovetails. I think it has to do with all the fibers. However, this one is shaping up to be a little bit tight. And that was right. It was a little bit too tight for me to hammer it home. Luckily, we've got notes right on the machine. For half-blind dovetails, you can see a looser joint tells us to raise the bit depth. A tighter joint tells us to lower the bit depth. So we're going to raise it. Okay, so I'm raising the bit down into the router there a little bit, and you can barely see it, but I just wanted to take it a tiny bit. I'll do a quick check, and I can see a little bit of air underneath it. It is absolutely no problem to re-put those boards back in because the template is set and the stop is set, so they'll go in perfectly. I'll recut them, and we'll test it again. And it looks like those are going together nicely. And that looks like a perfect fit. Okay, so we're going to keep working our way around the box. I'm going to put corner B in and match it up with corner B and just keep going. And there's B. Make sure once you get it slid in that you slide it all the way to the left up against that stop securely. And the nice thing is, now that we made that minor adjustment to the tightness, all of the rest of the dovetails will fit perfectly. This is definitely an option as well. If you use a cheaper grade of plywood as opposed to Baltic birch, they do tend to tear a little bit more. Sometimes tape can help that. And it looks like that one actually came out better. Not perfect, but it definitely came out better. For me, what I've always found is the key is to just go slow. And you can see that since we adjusted the tightness on the first one, all the rest of them will work out just fine. And we'll just put the last side on here and see how that looks. So if you have multiple drawers to build, which is almost always the case, it's best to just store them all assembled like this until you get ready to cut the bottoms. So I'm going to cut just one more here for the video, and I'm going to cut it a whole lot slower. I'm going to take my time and we'll see how it comes out in terms of tear out. There are a couple of factors that help as well as going slow. One is to make sure your blades stay clean, and the other is to use a carbide blade, which cuts a little bit better than just a high-speed steel blade. Okay, it looks like this one is a perfect cut. And all those are the little fibers that I was talking about. They're always present on plywood, and I think that's why they make for a tight fit. Whenever you have wider drawers, it takes just a little bit more persuasion with the mallet to put them into. You just need to be careful and tap them down very slowly. You can start at one side, work to the other, and work back and forth until it goes in. My daughter's helping me store them, and a good place to store them is where they go until we're ready to cut the bottoms. One important tip to remember is whether you're making a dresser or a desk or even a miter station, never cut your drawers until the body of your furniture is done. Then you can cut the drawers to fit perfectly. And now it's time to cut some bottoms. You're going to want to make sure that your drawer carcass there is square before you take your measurements. I'm going to measure from the inside to the inside of this drawer body, and then I'm going to add 3/4 of an inch to each measurement. That gives me 3/8 of an inch for the drawer bottom to go in on each side, and that's going to go into the rabbet. And make sure you write all of your numbers down in your shop notebook. Okay, now we get to take it apart. We do have to cut the dados in order to put our drawer bottoms in, and then we will cut the drawer bottoms. Okay, I've got a 1/2 inch dado set up in my saw, and I usually cut it 1/2 inch up from the bottom. A 1/2 inch bottom is certainly not necessary. A lot of times a 1/4 inch bottom will work. It just depends on how heavy the items you're going to put in your drawers are. Okay, so there is one drawer all complete. I always try to keep all of the drawer parts together with themselves throughout the entire process. The next step would be to cut out all of your bottoms. Remember to use the lengths and widths that are 3/4 of an inch bigger than the opening of the drawer, and hopefully you wrote that down in your shop notebook. That way these drawer bottoms will go recessed into the rabbets that you just cut. Now that your cutting is all finally done, the next step is to glue it all together. And remember, there is no such thing as too much glue. I like to get it on both sides of every surface and then wipe off the excess when I'm done. And if there's ever a failure from anything that I build, it certainly won't be from a lack of glue. You do need to work fairly quickly here as you're gluing these up. There are some glues that might dry a little bit quick. And for that reason, my choice of glue is Titebond 3. It has many properties that are good for situations like this, one of which it has the longest open pot life of all of the Titebond glues, so it takes the longest to set up, so you have a little more time to do your assembly. Now I am going to go ahead and put glue in the groove all the way around. If I were dealing with solid wood drawers or a solid wood bottom, perhaps like a cabinet door front, a raised panel door, I would most certainly make sure that the panel floats to account for expansion and contraction. But for plywood, that simply isn't needed because the layers of plywood go in alternating directions, so there really is no expansion or contraction. One more note here. On these plywood drawers, I am not going to clamp them together. I actually have designed them so they fit really tight. The glue in them makes them a little bit tighter. I just find that I finish them, square them up, and just let them sit to dry, and they stay perfect. I have actually built hundreds of drawers this way, and I have never once had a problem. It's important to not move them while they're drying, however. Okay, once they've dried overnight, I typically use a random orbit sander. I start with something pretty aggressive, like about 80 grit, and I just work my way down to about 220 grit. Whenever I sand plywood drawers, I make a habit of getting all of the corners very well. You get some pretty wicked splinters off of these corners if you don't sand them good. And there you have it, Half-Blind Dovetail Drawers. Thanks for watching.